My name is Quentin Camp, and this is my spring 2025 poster on my honors project on the constitutional limits of power for local governments to restrict people living in public. As homeless rates rise across the country, cities have made various attempts to restrict homeless people. This has sparked key court cases. However, there's still room for future clarification on their powers, which has raised the question, should the constitutional limits for local governments to restrict people be expanded or restricted? Materials and methods. I use court documents to establish clear guidelines for the current limits of power, law databases to locate sources, and I primarily used existing data, although I did conduct an interview and analyze the efforts of Portland and Burien through recent news articles. It's important to recognize my research limitations, as local officials have backgrounds that influence their political and ethical biases. To negate this, I used research that covered all 50 states. To understand if the limitation should be expanded, we must first look at the current court rulings in relation to the 4th, 8th, and 14th Amendments. Figure 1 features a timeline of important key rulings. In 1992, the case Pottinger versus City of Miami challenged the city's unconstitutional practice of arresting homeless individuals for harmless involuntary acts. The court held that public officials cannot punish people simply because they are homeless or engage in unavoidable behavior. Lavin versus City of Los Angeles ruled that homeless individuals had a protected property interest, therefore they could not seize and destroy personal property without due process. Martin v. City of Boise and the Ninth Circuit Court established that it was cruel and unusual punishment to prosecute homeless people while there was no available shelter. However, Martin v. City of Boise was overturned by the 2024 Supreme Court case Grants Pass v. Johnson. This case established that local governments do not violate the Eighth Amendment when enforcing public camping bans. During the Grants Pass v. Johnson case, the report in Figure 3 was taken. The red states submitted an ambitious brief in favor of criminalizing homelessness. Green submitted against, and gray were neutral. This shows that a majority of states wanted to criminalize homelessness. Moreover, Figure 2, a summary of public opinion polling on homelessness, shows that 68% of the population agree that homelessness can be solved at the local level, 62% at the state level, and 55% at the federal level. This reflects that a majority of people agree that local governments can solve the homeless crisis. Therefore, giving them more powers would increase their capabilities to do so. To understand a local official's stance, I interviewed Portland Mayor Keith Wilson. When I asked him if he thinks the rights of local governments to enforce public camping bans should be expanded, he replied saying, and I quote, more rights. Because when you have people suffering and dying on the street, it's an intolerable state. So a government that allows that to occur messages to its citizenry that they have and are helpless, that they are not guiding themselves and they are certainly not governing the community. In Figure 4, I briefly analyzed two case studies who have taken very different approaches to homelessness in Burien, Washington, and Portland, Oregon. Burien has passed ordinances restricting people living in public and evicted residents from encampments without shelter availability, while Portland has open shelters and day centers as well as ensuring help to anyone who needs it. Combining the public opinion, state opinion, and Mayor Wilson's statement, the majority agree on increased power for local governments to restrict homelessness. Although it still remains very controversial, the Grants Pass case did give more power to local governments. Based on the current limitations, there is a lot of room for clarification, and many agree that local governments still need more rights to deal with the homeless crisis in America. I want to acknowledge Portland Mayor Keith Wilson for his interview. The full interview is part of my project available on YouTube. I also want to acknowledge Professor Bruce Lamb for his assistance and allowing me to conduct the research in my initial project, and Highline librarian Ian Porter for assisting with the graphics on this poster. Thank you.